Hello, Manic Mercurian here, and today is a special day. It's my friend's birthday, so if you want to wish him a happy birthday in the comments, he would definitely appreciate that. He's been a very good friend to me, very, very kind and helpful, and always a positive influence. So I feel like I owe him. I feel like the least I can do today is give him some readings. So we are going to look at, first, we're going to look at his solar return chart, which I am showing now on screen. And then after that, we're going to do a deep dive into his astrocartography. So this first reading is going to be kind of a brief overview showing what his year is going to be like from this current birthday, so from today, going over the next year. Solar return charts are a really nice way to get a sort of thorough but also kind of brief view of somebody's year from the birthday to their next birthday. So first we'll do that, and then the deep dive into his astrocartography is going to look at the whole world map, and it will be sort of a something that we can look back to later for him since we've talked about this before. And because we don't have like a specific intention in mind with the astrocartography, that's why I'm saying it's going to be a deep dive. We're going to go through the whole world and see which regions which have kind of which flavors, astrologically speaking. And if you are interested in either of these readings, I do offer paid readings, including these and also other types as well. If you are interested in that, I have more information on my website. It's www.manicmercurian.net. I know that's a mouthful, so I will include the link in the description. Okay, but let's start with this solar return reading. So, for the solar return, this basically is the chart where the sun is at the exact degree, the exact point of one's birth. So in this chart, we don't get a lot of meaning from the sun sign, of course. It's going to be always the exact same. That's the whole point of the chart. But we can get a lot of information from what the other planets are doing, including aspects to the sun. We can also see what house is the sun in. And most importantly, the main things I look at in a solar return chart are the ascendant and the moon. You can kind of think of the ascendant and moon signs as coloring the entire year. So in this case, we have Sun is of course at the end of Cancer, like it always will be for the solar return charts for this person here. But the ascendant is in Gemini today for this chart, and then Moon is in Taurus. So Taurus Moon, Gemini rising. This is really interesting to me because these signs are very different. Gemini rising would typically indicate a lot of change in your year, but Taurus rising would typically indicate a lot of stability. So I think this will kind of create a very healthy balance. Maybe a lot of things in your life kind of continuing to be sort of somewhat the same, but also maybe some healthy changes as well. So that's where that juxtaposition of Taurus and Gemini, two very different signs, can actually create a really well-rounded year for you, I think. Getting more specific though, the moon is in the 12th house. That would indicate maybe a lot of time alone, maybe a lot of time spent kind of reflecting over things or kind of just integrating, time spent alone in general. And to get a little bit darker, real quick, the moon is close to Mars, so that could indicate maybe some frustration or pent up anger or issues, feelings along those lines. I would typically advise like maybe just be a little bit more cautious because Mars energy can result in accidents. I know that you are a, you know, you're a very cautious person that thinks before you act, generally speaking. Um, for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, he has Libra moon, so he's typically a pretty relaxed, cautious individual. So this shouldn't be too much of an issue, but I could see some maybe like anger or frustration a little bit. So that is maybe one of the more challenging parts of this chart. Um, but other than that, we've got some good things going on. It's interesting, because you were born with the sun at the very end of Cancer, Mercury will be either in Cancer or Leo about kind of 50-50 percent of the time, depending on solar return, if that makes sense. So for this particular year, you have Mercury in Leo for your solar return. So that could maybe add some like optimism and enthusiasm to your thinking, compared to years where you'd have Mercury in Cancer. Because Mercury is always close to the sun, you're always going to have it in either Cancer or Leo for every solar return. So for this one, maybe some kind of, optimistic thinking. You're thinking more in a more outgoing way, more confident. Maybe you're expressing yourself more than usual, I guess. Venus is in your second house, which is really, really beautiful for finances. So you could have maybe a productive year. Typically, when we have Venus in second house, we make a lot of money and we also enjoy spending that money. So maybe you'll be hard at work making more money, but also definitely treating yourself a lot this year. And what's the point of money if we can't use that to create an enjoyable experience for ourselves, a comfortable experience for ourselves in this lifetime? So that's kind of what I would expect. This isn't like solar return charts are they kind of have a soft impact. Like what I'm saying is definitely true, but you have to take into account, of course, like different transits going on. So, this may not be super consistent over the entire year, but these are generalizations I like to say. One strong theme though is that you have a lot of Saturn energy coloring your career. Your career, your public profile are indicated by the midheaven, and midheaven is in Aquarius, so midheaven is not only ruled by Saturn, but it's also conjunct Saturn. So this means maybe being really disciplined with your work, having kind of a slow and steady approach with your career. You're being very thorough this year. What's interesting though is that Saturn is retrograde, and so this can indicate maybe you taking a lot of time away from work this year. So, and that could look very different, depending on the situation. That could look like maybe you're just treating yourself to more vacations this year. It could also mean that you may have an extended absence at some point this year. So maybe, missing work for a couple weeks or a month or something. It really, really just varies. And again, this is kind of a light overtone, I mean, what would be more vivid is looking at the transits that will be affecting you, for the following months. But again, this is kind of just a generalization. So you may have some kind of leave from your work this year. Jupiter and Neptune are both in your 11th house of, kind of like networking and friends, groups that you affiliate yourself with. So Jupiter is kind of expanding that area. So maybe you're more visible, you're more active socially this year. And then Neptune is kind of adding some confusion there. So maybe there's some like kind of inexplicable changes with whom you associate yourself with, or this could be online activity as well. You may, I don't know, suddenly leave or enter different kind of groups or networks throughout the year. Um, and I think I'm almost at the end of this, to be honest. Like I said, I like to keep these very brief because I found that when you get really, really nitty gritty into specifics, it starts to become less accurate. Really the moon and the ascendant are the most tangible things. So, moon in Taurus, very grounded, spending time alone with that 12th house moon in Taurus, um, but being very grounded generally speaking. But then Gemini rising, maybe you'd have an intellectual focus this year with the Gemini rising, learning a lot, um, maybe some general changes. I know that's very vague, but um, again, I find the most accuracy when we keep these kind of broad for solar return charts. But yeah, that's what I see. So overall, I like to. I mean, maybe this is subjective. I guess everything's subjective, but I like to see, is this gonna be like a really easy year? Is it gonna be a hard year? Is it gonna be fun? Overall, I don't see it as overwhelmingly challenging or overwhelmingly. I don't think you'll be jumping with joy all year, but I don't think you'll be crying. And you know, it seems like a. It seems like a kind of well-rounded year. I feel like it's interesting. I think you'll be focused on your work a lot this year, but then you'll also have maybe time away from work as well. And then otherwise, a lot of consistency, but also some nice changes. So pretty like well-rounded with that. You're definitely not stuck in a rut this year, but you're also not completely changing your life. I think you're just kind of gradually making some changes. So that looks pretty nice to me. Um, South Node is in sixth house, so just watch your health this year. And I don't want to be a negative Nancy. And and going back to the Mars stuff real quick here too, if I mention things like, oh, you should maybe be cautious, and there's a chance you could have like a violent accident this year. I'm definitely not wishing that on you, obviously, but I also don't want it to be true. These things don't have to be true. That's part of why we look at astrology, so that we can, recognize these things and maybe change our behavior just slightly, adapt to it to maybe avoid certain circumstances that aren't as preferable. Um, so yeah, Moon by Mars, maybe just, I don't know, maybe just keep that in mind. And then same with South Node in sixth house. Um, Sixth house can represent health among other things, and then South Node can, at least with transits, it can sort of create some issues sometimes. Um, North Node is in the 12th house, so it's really showing that your focus will already be on kind of yourself and spending time maybe alone, or spending time processing things, and having the North Node in this area as well of the chart where the moon is, shows that that's truly what will be most rewarding for you. So yeah, maybe just kind of chill out, just treat yourself, have it, uh, maybe spend. Well, it's interesting because I would typically say maybe spend more time just alone or with very very close people that are very close to you, but Jupiter's in the 11th house as well, so two things can be true. I guess you can do both. You can be very active with your social life and then also have more time alone. If you just think of what we do in a full year, I mean, there's such a range there. I think that's why these readings tend to be more vague, because they can both be true. You can spend a lot of time alone this year, but also broaden your social circles at the same time. So that's what I would expect. So this is really an overwhelmingly well-rounded solar return, I think. South Node is in sixth house, so I say like kind of watch your health, but there's nothing overwhelmingly, foreboding about this at all. And yeah, that's kind of what I see. So hopefully that makes sense and kind of just gives you an overlook of your year ahead. And with all that being said, let's take a look at your astrocartography now. Okay, and let me kind of just adjust the screen a little bit here. I think I'm gonna go continent by continent with this. Um, yeah, this is a good view, I think. So let's start out with North America, and I'm actually gonna let's start out with Alaska, and then we'll kind of work our way down. Um, this will be a really really thorough astrocartography reading. Okay, so starting out with Alaska, you don't have a lot of lines there. I mean, with North America in general, you do have mini lines, so that there's a lot to unpack. A lot to unpack here. But in Alaska specifically, there's not a whole lot going on. Well, I guess there's three lines we can talk about. There is the North Node IC line, there's the Mars IC line, and then there's Jupiter descendant line. So I know anyone listening to this, odds are you probably don't know what I'm talking about. So I will, of course, as always, I will translate what these things mean. So just bear with me. But sort of in like more western Alaska, kind of going through the like Aleutian Panhandle or Peninsula, and then kind of cutting through sort of western Alaska, but it's kind of inland, like mainland western Alaska. That's where your North Node IC line is. So this would show this would show a lot of positive changes happening at home. I know the odds of you living in this area are probably pretty slim, but if you ever did, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I mean, for one, I wouldn't necessarily recommend living in these regions anyway. I'm from Anchorage, Alaska, which I know is not around this line, but I think it takes a certain person for that. And being a Florida native, I don't know how much you would enjoy that. It's a little bit different, obviously, but living here, I don't know if I'd recommend, not only, not because of the area, but because the North Node IC line is very positive. Don't get me wrong. It could maybe be good if you wanted to go for like a retreat in this area and live there for like a month or something. The problem with living there for an extended period of time is that you would be very unstable with your home life. Um, Nodal energy, particularly North Node energy, is really great for expansion, evolution, very karmic events happening. So And by karmic events, I mean like, you just happen to meet, you're someone you fall in love with or something, or you just happen to a lot of this is social. Like you happen to just talk to someone that lands you a really perfect job. Like kind of unusual events happening that are directing your life. So I often say that nodal energy is like it's like you're in a movie. It's like movie energy. It's like things things that would happen in a movie that you go, oh, that is so not realistic. It's like it's almost like those things are actually happening to you in real life. It's like, what are the odds that there's so much drama and so many developments. But this is the energy that would color your home life in this area. And it is North Node, so this is more positive. It would help you expand and evolve a lot. You may become maybe very wise, mature, figure things out in this area at a very rapid pace. But again, it's unstable. You would have just constant change, constant learning, constant growth. And that's really great. Learning, growth, all that sounds really awesome, and it is awesome. But do you want that energy with your home life? I would, I could picture you like moving around a lot here. Or actually, I think the natural course of things would be if you lived here, you'd probably naturally move out of here with that energy because North Node IC line is going to stimulate a lot of life changes related to your home. So it's like it's almost by its very nature, the energy. This energy would almost, as positive as it could be, it would almost propel you out of there. So yeah, that's a good segue. Let's move on. Eastern Alaska, kind of right by the Canada border, you've got your Mars IC line. Wouldn't recommend living there either. I wouldn't even recommend visiting. Mars lines we typically like to avoid unless it's a specific situation because the malefics, Mars, Pluto, Saturn, these energies are more challenging. Mars, in particular, like I touched on earlier, can coincide with violent events. So, making you violent, making someone else in your life violent, or not making them, but corresponding to that happening, I guess. It could also be violent accidents. So, maybe just witnessing more accidents in these areas, or maybe being part of an accident yourself. So that's where and because it's the Mars IC line, this would especially pertain to your home life. So your home life, you might be more irritable, more frustrated, more angry. You could also be much more ambitious at home, but that doesn't really make sense, does it? I mean, unless you work at home or something. Um, Really, I wouldn't recommend this for anything. I mean, if you if you wanted maybe more confidence at home, Mars can make us more ambitious, especially for, personalities that maybe lack Mars energy in their chart. That is like one silver lining that could be positive, but you're kind of rolling the dice though because of all the other stuff I talked about, where maybe you'll be more confident, but then you could also have more violent accidents. So is that worth it? Um, Probably not. And again, I doubt I don't know, you probably wouldn't go to this area anyway. That's what's so kind of quirky about astrocartography is that it colors these like random areas in such a vivid way. But yeah, so maybe don't go there. I don't know if you were gonna go there anyway, maybe not. But Mars IC line, I wouldn't recommend. Even for a Mars, like I would generally say to avoid Mars lines, but even for a Mars line, Mars coloring the home life and the family represented by IC, I really don't think that's where, if we do need Mars energy, it's not in the home, I don't think. Maybe in your career, if anything. Um, but yeah, so maybe a place to avoid. Oh, and I wanted to mention, I'm gonna take notes. I think I'm gonna, after I make this video, I'm gonna go back, take notes, and then I will leave those in the description for you. So I'll kind of break it down by continent, I think. Okay, so on a much more positive note, though, you have your Jupiter descendant line going through the panhandle, I guess the other panhandle, kind of cutting off like right at the beginning of this southeastern part of Alaska here. And the Jupiter descendant line crosses over Canada. At some point in Canada, it becomes the Jupiter ascendant line, so I know that's confusing. But pretty much, Jupiter lines in general are very positive, and these are benefics. This isn't a planet that's easy to work with. So Jupiter, Sun, and Venus lines are gonna be positive, generally speaking. So this is much different, and what's interesting is it actually does cross your Mars IC line right in kind of this corner of Southeast Alaska here. Um, And so, okay, so what would that do? Jupiter descendant line would expand your relationship. So you may meet many more people here. And the people you meet would be of a kind of Jupiterian energy. So that means that they would be very charismatic and very open, very outgoing and positive, optimistic. They would have a jovial nature or a happy go lucky nature to their personality. And this would also be really good for romantic relationships for you. So it could improve a romantic relationship, or maybe you could meet someone with this kind of really fun, strong, adventurous Jupiter energy, and then that energy would define your relationship as well. So you're, um, let's see, and this would not only apply to like a partnership or a romantic relationship. It will also apply to all your kind of connections, maybe to a varying extent. So this is really positive. You'd have, a lot of expansion and growth through your relationships, and you'd have a lot of fun in the process. Now, somewhere kind of over Canada, this becomes the Jupiter ascendant line, so it becomes a lot more focused on you. So now it's not your relationships having this energy, it's you having this energy. And that's really good too. It's at least as good as the Jupiter descendant line, I would say objectively. So, um, and again, are you going to go to these areas? I don't know. I don't know how much you're going to travel the world, but if you go to these like northern islands of Canada, it's hard for me to say exactly where the Jupiter line switches from descendant to ascendant, but still you're going to have those Jupiter themes of expansion, optimism, um, being really positive and adventurous. I guess you'd already be adventurous if you're kind of up in these nether northern regions anyway. And then it kind of cuts down through Greenland, and by that time, I'd say it's I'd be pretty confident it is the ascendant line, so it'd be affecting you personally. You personally would be more optimistic, adventurous, etc. In Greenland, of all places. And then, okay, what's really interesting, and I noticed this kind of thing happening in a lot of charts, and for some reason it happens to be in some kind of northern location. I don't know why. I don't understand the astrocartography of that, but for some reason we all tend to have our lines like all kind of across somewhere north up here. Usually I see it in Siberia or Alaska, but I guess for you it's kind of by Greenland here. So I'm not even gonna begin to talk about what all would happen here. I mean, I think I could sit here all day just talking about that. But yeah, and honestly, I don't know. I don't know anyone who's gone up to these northern regions where all their lines cross. I don't. I like to be very honest in telling you exactly what I know and what I don't know, and I don't know what would happen here. Would it be some kind of spiritual experience? Maybe you'll have to go to this like coastline of Greenland just to see. And then that begs the question too. How much crazy stuff could really happen in such a remote location? Like, would it just be a personal, I don't know, experience where you I'm almost picturing it like a DMT experience or something. I don't know. I don't know what would happen there. So for the sake of kind of simplicity and time, let's move on and look at Canada. So you have a lot of lines crossing here. So in most of central and western Canada, you have these lines kind of overarching here, from from southwest to northeast. And so I'll just kind of go through those quickly. I guess I'll go through it line by line since they cover much of the continental United States and Mexico as well. And then after that, we'll kind of cover the east coast, particularly of Canada and New England. There's kind of all these vertical lines here, as you can see, so we'll cover those as well. So, okay, so after the Jupiter descendant line, there is the Venus descendant line. So this is super great as well. This is probably the best line for relationships. Um, Jupiter descendant, or excuse me, Venus descendant. Yeah, Venus descendant would be very similar to Jupiter descendant. It's just you have the energy of Venus coloring your descendant. So again, descendant has everything to do with relationships, one-on-one relationships, romantic relationships, business partnerships, whatever it is, as well as your relationship to kind of everybody on maybe a lesser extent. So Venus is another benefic. It's going to bring abundance, joy, desire. So maybe you'll be more in tune with your desire and be very. You would come off as attractive to other people, and other people will be more attractive to you as well. And the types of people you would attract would be attractive, and not only physically attractive, but their demeanor would be attractive. They would be charismatic. Um, I've noticed like Venus personalities have a kind of easygoing charisma. It's not like super fiery and in your face necessarily. It's more like a laid back, charismatic, like very polite and just easy to relate to. Those are the types of people you would generally attract on your Venus line. So this would be like the very kind of southeast tip of Alaska and then kind of going across like northern Canada. And again, I don't know if you're gonna go to all these places, but if you do, you might meet some charming people. Maybe I don't know. I haven't been up there, but for you, that is a probability. Moving on, the next line would be the Chiron descendant line crossing over. It actually crosses through Seattle. Even Portland, Oregon, you would experience this as well. It's within range. It goes pretty much right over Seattle, pretty close there. Kind of the western Washington, and then it cuts over, right by Vancouver, BC, and then it kind of goes inward through Alberta, and then over kind of northern Canada again. Okay, so what is this line? Actually, because there's 2 to 3 lines that sort of converge here. Let's talk about what you would experience in Western Washington because these lines are all kind of clumped together here. So, and let me take a look. So we've got Saturn ascendant line, Uranus ascendant line pretty close, and then Chiron descendant. All right, so these are some funky energies, and what's interesting is that their orbits are all very close, well, relatively close to one another in the solar system. They're all kind of side by side. So okay, let's break it down one by one. Actually, so the Saturn ascendant line, and again, you would experience all 3 of these very much so in Western Washington. Well, really Washington or Western Oregon. Um, and then they kind of spread out a little bit, but they go over, BC, British Columbia, and then Alberta as well. So this whole kind of area, you'd have the Saturn ascendant line, so you could lose weight because there would be like this constrictive, restraining energy placed on your identity. Now, generally, that's not fun. So you may come across as like more serious, more disciplined. Um, Saturn is a malefic, so typically this is something we would avoid, but there are definitely some good parts to Saturn. Like if you wanted to lose weight, losing weight can be good or bad. So, I think we've talked about this. Like with Saturn energy causing you to lose weight, sometimes it could be because you're getting sick or something. That would definitely be very Saturnian, losing weight because of an illness. Um, but Saturn energy could also make you more disciplined, maybe like working out more, being more active, and then losing weight that way in a more kind of positive way. Either would be more likely to happen on a Saturn ascendant line, especially because the ascendant again is coloring your identity. It's your self-expression, your appearance, and all that will be more Saturnian, so more constricted, more restrained. Um, you may be more disciplined or kind of slow to react, or more cautious, more responsible, I guess. I know you're already responsible, I would say, but that energy is kind of coloring things, and this could also be a little bit depressing, to be honest. Like Saturn is kind of like a weight; it weighs us down, and I mean that's the energy. That's what I feel with Saturn energy when I experience Saturnian transits. And this can be good. This can like maybe make us like slower and more cautious. We really think through things before we act. But depending on what your personal astrology is, you may not need this. So overall, this energy would be heavy. This would be mostly ideal for if you wanted more structure and discipline in your life. If you wanted to slow down, if you wanted to take things more seriously, that this would be a good energy to experience. We also have the Uranus ascendant line close by, not as close as the Saturn and Chiron lines, but Uranus ascendant line going over, kind of central and eastern Washington. And I give an orb of like 1 to 200 miles. If you're within that range from one of these lines, you'll experience this energy as well. So, um, okay, so the Uranus ascendant line is going to be a lot different. So it's interesting combining both of these in a place where you'll be close to both. The Uranus ascendant line would, have the energy of your Uranus coloring your ascendant, so coloring your identity and self-expression. So Uranus is almost like, in a lot of ways, it's almost like the opposite of Saturn. It's kind of having you break free and like rebel and come across maybe profound new perspectives, new information. So this is like, mind blown energy. This is really groundbreaking, innovative. So you would be more innovative. You would come across this way. You could maybe have a psychological makeover on your Uranus line. This to me is a little bit like the node lines in the sense that it is unstable. So if you wanted to like, really break out of your own personality and be different, this would be a good line to go to. Uranus is not really a benefic or a malefic, I wouldn't say. Its effects, it kind of just depends on what you're looking for. Like I said, if you were just kind of stuck in a rut and feeling like you've been the same, you're kind of like bored with yourself, go to your honest line and maybe you'll surprise yourself. Maybe you'll have a shift in your opinions or your view on things. That's what the Uranus line could be good for. It could also just change your personality in general, and with Uranus, expect the unexpected. So maybe I don't know, maybe it would just be changes that you wouldn't even think of in yourself, in how you come across to people, in your appearance, in your mannerisms. All of that could change a lot. Your opinions. I think I covered everything. So that's very interesting, especially when we combine it with the Saturn line. Maybe being more serious and more strict, but also having some huge breakthroughs or shifts with your thinking as well. So that'd be very interesting. And then thirdly, through Western Washington specifically, but also going across Canada, like we talked about, we've got the Chiron descendant line. Excuse me. I may take little tiny breaks to just drink water throughout this, since this is going to be a long reading. Um, so the Chiron descendant line, and anyone like wanting to learn how I do this, I think it should become obvious, especially once I do many examples. It's honestly pretty simple. We just take, in this case, Chiron's energy and then apply it to the descendant along this line. Descendant again is about relationships, one-on-one relationships, relationships with just people you attract, people you meet as well. So Chiron is the wounded healer. So Chiron likes to get a little weird. I'm not gonna lie. Chiron increases empathy, and that sounds like it would really be like kumbaya. Let's gather around the bonfire. But with Chiron, there is increased empathy, but it ends up being kind of awkward. It's awkward, I think, because it brings up a lot of emotional issues. It can be very therapeutic, but it can also be weird. It's hard to explain. So with this calling your descendant, your relationships, you may attract very fated connections there. So you may meet someone that ends up triggering something in you, or maybe you trigger something in them. Um, but it would trigger something potentially healing. That's its more positive side, I think. The only reason why I'm hesitant to talk about it, or uh, trepidatious, I guess, is a word I like to use with Karen, is just because having increased empathy on your with your relationships, that sounds really great, but it can be difficult as well. Because the way I think humanity is at this current stage, we're not really built we're not quite yet built for like mind reading, or just walking in a room and just knowing exactly how we all feel. I think we like to maybe take things slow sometimes. We like to have filters to protect ourselves. So I think that's why the empathy can be awkward. So this is not. I would not want to color this as overwhelmingly positive or negative. I think you could meet some very interesting people along this line. Maybe like past life connections, or people that just you have a very strong connection to right away, and like I said, maybe you can heal something within each other. Um, but then on the minus side, maybe awkwardness from this like over empathy with people, or maybe attracting people that are like overly, em- I don't want to say overly empathetic, but there's almost like an awkwardness that comes with that, and it's hard to explain. But this is something that I've learned from observing Chiron transits. So maybe if you go there, you'll see what I mean. So yeah, so combining all those in this area, that looks very interesting. I would break it down into the ascendant parts and the descendant parts. So on the one side, your identity think would change a lot over this area, having two planet ascendant lines right there. Again, maybe being more disciplined, but also more open to innovation at the same time. And then again, your relationships would take on a more mentoring nature. So you mentoring other people mentoring you, helping one another, increased empathy, etc. One line that I kind of glossed over is the Moon Midheaven line. It does cross over, southeastern. It actually conjoins the Venus Descendant line in the tip of southeastern Alaska, and then kind of goes up into, through the Yukon Territory mostly, it looks like, in Canada. Moon Midheaven line, we combined Moon with the Midheaven for you, so your career would take on a lunar nature. So you may work from home on this line, or you may be especially very nurturing at your place of work around this line as well. Let's move on just for the sake of time. So, all right, there are so many lines over North America. Next we have this glyph always throws me off because to me it looks so vague, but it's the Neptune ascendant line, and this crosses over the United States, California, Nevada, kind of lower Idaho, and then Montana, and then it crosses over, I think, Saskatchewan and Manitoba. This is really like testing my geography, and then it goes over kind of up north here. So the Neptune ascendant line again, I wouldn't like necessarily avoid it. I wouldn't want to. I guess it just depends on what you're trying to do. If you were trying to be a psychic medium or something, I would absolutely recommend going out and living on your Neptune ascendant line because, your identity would take on a Neptunian nature. So this would be really great for being more creative, more intuitive, connecting with, your psychic senses with your guides or with God or with the aliens or whatever. With the non-physical realms, with whatever it is, you would be more psychic, more intuitive on this line. Um, and it's almost, well, it's kind of in between LA and San Francisco, I guess. So maybe those cities would be kind of close enough to experience that, but especially right here, whatever cities right there in California. But yeah, Boise, I believe would be on this line. Not really a lot of major cities, I don't think, but maybe Boise and then California. Maybe like Lake Tahoe or um, Reno, Nevada, something like that. The reason why I'd be a little bit cautious is because Neptune can make things very confusing. So you could be, and this is gonna sound contradictory, but I think when we experience states of enhanced intuition and psychic abilities, it can be also very confusing. So you're simultaneously more aware of the non-physical realms, but that it can be a lot to deal with. That can be, a curse or a blessing, or both, I guess. So, you could also maybe be more likely to lose your sense of reality or become confused, to become um, there's like this element of mystery with Neptune, and you yourself would come across in this way as well. So you could come across very comforting to people. People sense this like calming energy from you if you're on this line more so, but people may also be confused by you. It's almost like they're not really seeing you for who you are if you're experiencing Neptune ascendant energy. People are just seeing a reflection of themselves, or they're seeing what they want you to look like, or they're seeing their fears. It's like they're not. It's almost like they're unable to connect with the quote real you. But then that brings up what is the real you? Maybe everything that they're seeing in you is real. It becomes very confusing. Neptune makes things confused. So this line too, I think would be really great for like a spiritual retreat or something, or if you wanted to go out and just like meditate in one of these areas a lot for something, um, or even like Salt Lake City's almost within range, maybe, um, something along those lines. But living there, probably, I wouldn't really recommend. Okay, let's move on. Next, we've got the Mercury descendant line. We haven't had a Mercury line yet, so let's see. And I'm just thinking, This is gonna be so long. I didn't realize how long this was gonna be. I may have to do this in like chapters. But Mercury descendant line crosses over northern Baja, Mexico, so just kind of south of the border from California, and then it kind of goes into the California-Arizona border. So Las Vegas would be close to this line, maybe Phoenix, Arizona, and then it crosses over Salt Lake City's kind of within range. Um, Maybe Denver. I'm not so sure about that. But then it crosses over, looks like the Dakotas, and then Manitoba, I think, whatever this are. Anyway, but the Mercury descendant line, so Mercury would color your descendant, so you would attract very intellectual people. You would have partnerships with people that may teach you things, people that may be very chatty, that would share a lot of like information or like tidbits with you. So you could learn a lot from other people on this line, and maybe attract some really interesting people, have some really interesting conversations. So that could be really good here. Um, and also, if you already have relationships that you're like bringing to this line, you may be more chatty or more intellectual, more analytical with one another. This too, Mercury is not a malefic or a benefic. I wouldn't be wary of this line at all unless, I think you're someone that can handle Mercurian energy just fine. So that would be fine. It's just not necessarily, I think it just depends on what you're trying to do, really, what your intentions are. Do you want to attract more, intelligent, more analytical people? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It kind of just depends, on what you're trying to do. But yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Next, we've got the Pluto midheaven line, which it almost like just divides North America in half. It just cuts like right down the middle, this black line here. Pretty much right through the middle of Mexico, through the middle of the US and Canada. Um, I don't think there's a lot of major cities here. It's like Western Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, maybe Eastern Montana or the Dakotas, and then right through the middle of Canada, let's just say. So Pluto midheaven, Pluto on your midheaven in this area. Pluto is malefic, so I did say to generally avoid Pluto lines. Um, but there's a silver lining with everything. There's always something we can learn from these energies. Pluto midheaven would make you appear much more powerful with your reputation and with your work, with your career. Or maybe people just out in public would be very interested in you because they sense like a powerful presence. That's very common with Pluto energy. So you could be maybe more ambitious and more powerful with your work or with your career. So far that sounds pretty positive. The only reason why I'd be a little bit cautious here is because Pluto can bring up some very challenging themes. And we're experiencing a lot of that at the time of me making this, actually. Um, so there could be, Pluto has this tendency of creating like death and destruction and rebirth, so your career could be maybe it could be strengthened in the sense that you'd be more ambitious, more powerful, um, especially if you were someone wanting power or status, you could definitely maybe, achieve that with your Pluto midheaven line. But it wouldn't always necessarily be stable or um, Pluto energy can make us paranoid, so you may, and I know your personality. I'm not saying you'd be. I don't think this is a tendency for you, but it's almost like Pluto midheaven line could make someone addicted to like power, wealth, status, and it's almost like it would never be enough. So there's almost like this dark kind of side to it where it's never enough. You're not. Maybe you are much more powerful here, but you're not content. You're always like looking for an issue, looking for a problem. Like Pluto energy is it's kind of dark. It can be very challenging. So you would feel constantly challenged here with your career and reputation, even though you'd also be more powerful and ambitious there. Like you'd feel like there's a threat all the time with your career. Let's move on. Sun descendant line. Sun is much more bright energy, so it's really interesting where it combines looks like right by this bend of the Rio Grande by the Mexico-Texas border. I don't know if there's any cities around there, but yeah, very interesting where those cross. So the sun descendant line would have, that would mean you would attract people with like Leo energy, so people that are outgoing and vibrant and really fun. This kind of crosses over Mexico, Texas, the Midwest, let's just say, to to make it simple, Ontario, northern Quebec, and yeah, so you would be more, you would have more vibrant relationships. You'd have a lot more fun with your relationships. So this is really good. Again, this is Sun is a benefic. Any Sun, Venus, Jupiter line is good. I would recommend visiting there, living there, whatever. It would generally be a good energy. And look here where the Sun and Jupiter lines cross. So that would be really, really exciting and a time of a place of abundance and fun and vitality up in like Ontario here. But yeah, for the sun line, you'd attract people that are very positive, outgoing, very warm, fiery, and yeah, your relationships would take on that energy as well. I think that kind of sums it up. Jupiter IC line crosses over. It's close enough to New Orleans that you'd experience it there. Crosses over like the Yucatan Peninsula, Belize, El Salvador. I think this is Honduras, and Guatemala. So like Central America, let's just say. It's too late. I already named all these countries, but whatever. And then it crosses over kind of like the South, like Mississippi, Alabama, and Illinois, right through Chicago, right next to Chicago, I guess I should say, Wisconsin, northern Michigan, and then Ontario. So along these lines, Jupiter IC, applying Jupiter to the IC. IC is home and family. You would experience especially expansion with your home. So I could picture you having maybe improving your house in these areas. So maybe like moving to a much bigger home or experiencing a lot more positivity in your home or wherever it is you're staying there if you're visiting. Um, Expansion, growth, abundance at home and with your family. And then this is more positive as well. Optimism. I'm kind of just listing off Jupiter keywords like optimism, expansion, etc. That's kind of what you'd experience there. As for Florida, so this indicates that this is your birthplace here where this crosses, as you know. But there's not a lot of lines around here. The Jupiter IC line is close. I don't think it's close enough to really affect you here necessarily. Not a whole lot of lines, so we would have to get much more technical if you wanted to see. Well, actually, on second thought, because you were born here, this gets really complicated. But your birth chart would basically be what your astrocartography would look like for your birthplace. So I guess we would just look to that to see what's going on there. For other regions besides your birthplace, that if you didn't have any lines, we would have to look at your birthplace. Excuse me. To look at your astrocartography for that location, we would have to look at that place as if you were born there. At the very same time you were born, if you were actually born at this other location, what would your chart look like? That's how that would work. But anyway, moving on. So for the rest of North America, let's just say for the sake of time, like Quebec, Nova Scotia, like all these kind of like eastern provinces of Canada, and then also Maine. Um, well, I guess I have to kind of break it down though because of the relatively narrow range of each line. So, okay, so Maine, you've got Venus IC line. So this would be really great for your home life. Your home would be more beautiful. Um, and if you're just visiting, it could just be maybe you'd be more likely to stay in a beautiful place or have more desire and attraction at home, more pleasure at home. You'd want to stay in, I guess. You'd want to stay at home. And then for kind of going to these eastern provinces of Canada, we've got a whole bunch of lines here. So we've got North Node Ascendant line, Saturn Midheaven line, Uranus Midheaven line. Um, so it's almost like a reflection of what we talked about in Washington. Uh, Saturn, Uranus, Chiron, and then we've got Saturn, Uranus, Chiron here as well, and the North Node and a Moon descendant line thrown in here just off the coast as well. And then there's also Mars and Neptune, but they're off kind of over the Atlantic, so we won't. I'm just gonna assume I'm not gonna cover like all the oceans, like. um, so okay, so for these kind of eastern provinces, a lot of change or a lot of interesting dynamics would take place on your career. So there'd be a heavy focus with your career. I just got like a hair blown into my nose that was floating. Um, I got it out. But so okay, with Saturn and Uranus coloring your midheaven, and your career, you'd be much more disciplined with your career, more strict with your career, focused on work, 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 work. But you'd also be more, open. You'd have maybe your work would change dramatically as well in these areas. Um, North node ascendant line just adds more instability. You'd be growing a lot. We kind of talked about that earlier. You would be growing very fast and experiencing a lot of, karmic interactions and experiences, but it would be unstable. You'd be experiencing constant change. You would be constantly changing in this area. So that would be some really interesting stuff. Combining all of it, I don't see this as overwhelmingly negative or positive, but I do think it would be very intense. There'd just be so much going on. I don't know. I don't know if I would recommend it. I think it would take, again, this is one of those things where it depends on your intentions. If you really want that kind of experience, it could be good. It just kind of depends. Moon descendant line really would only take into account if you're on the like eastern edge of like um Newfoundland. Is that yeah? Um, New Brunswick. Moon descendant line, you would attract people that are more emotional, maybe clingy, people that really want to be close to you and are really empathetic and emotional, um, and your relationships would be more emotional as well if you're on these kind of outer edges here. Let's go down to South America. Um, this is gonna be so long. Oh, we're almost at an hour already. Oh my god. Okay. Um, so I may have to make another video like tomorrow or something. I don't know. Okay, South America. And this is kind of hard. Well, let's actually go west to east just because these lines are all pretty vertical in South America. So going west to east, the first line we have is the North Node Ascendant line. These are actually all the same lines I just talked about that were up in, kind of eastern Canada. So that's kind of funky. So you'd experience the same themes, but they do spread out just a little bit. Okay, so North Node Ascendant line again, again going back to that instability, you would be evolving so quickly. You would be learning so much along this line. You would be changing so much, but this is unstable. The constant change could be really thrilling for a while. You could learn a lot. You could expand a lot. You could, I think this would be really, really beautiful in a certain dosage. I wouldn't recommend living on this line because you would just be unstable. Your life would be a roller coaster. So roller coasters are fun, but we don't want to live on the roller coaster. We don't want to stay the night on the roller coaster. We go on the roller coaster for 20 minutes and then we're done. That's really what I would say. So this colors all of Chile for sure. That's kind of convenient. It's such a long country, and the line really goes right along all of Chile. Kind of the eastern edge of Peru by the Bolivia border. Kind of this Amazonian, this like very very remote region of Amazonian Brazil. So I don't know if you're how adventurous you are, but and then it kind of goes through the Colombia Venezuela border, and then right through kind of the middle of Venezuela. Speaking of that, we also have the Venus IC line, and these also, I guess I shouldn't skip over these Caribbean islands. The Dominican Republic and then Puerto Rico has the North Node Ascendant line cutting right through it, and the Venus IC line is very close as well, and the Venus IC line is very close to the Dominican Republic, I believe. So Venus IC line, again, we talked about that earlier. You'd want to stay at home on this line because your home would be where your desire is, your attraction, your desire, your pleasure is all kind of at home. Your home may be more appealing to you. You may, attract living situations that are more attractive, so maybe more aesthetically pleasing, but also like more relaxed, more comfortable mentally and emotionally as well. So really comfy vibes. Those go through Venezuela, Amazonian Brazil, Bolivia, and Argentina, but it's kind of remote, like Western Argentina, not through Buenos Aires. Moving on, we've got your Saturn Uranus lines will be pretty much conjunct wherever we are in the world. So they both go through. Um, Excuse me. They both go through. I think they're much closer to Buenos Aires, and then they go through eastern Bolivia, and then kind of central Brazil. It's still kind of way out in the Amazon. And then through, I forget what this is. I forget what that country is. Northern South America, let's just say. So these lines, the Saturn and Uranus midheaven lines, sorry, for if you're watching, I right clicked. I tend to do that. I need a mouse with like no, I don't know, but okay, so this would make your career very interesting. The focus would be on your career in these areas. You'd be much more disciplined and strict with your career, focusing on work a lot, but you'd also be experiencing a lot of unexpected shifts through your career and your public reputation. So, maybe dramatic highs and lows at work and in public, or um, I don't know, just it's hard to say because by its very nature it would be unpredictable. So sudden, unexpected changes, unexpected, profound realizations, things of that nature. Through kind of central Brazil, we've got the Mars ascendant line, and it's pretty much within range of it is within range of the Chiron IC line through the whole thing. I would I'd personally want to say I'd avoid this. And it goes through French Guiana. Actually, I know what that one is. And then kind of near the mouth of the Amazon. But Mars ascendant line, so you would be much more like Mars. So you would be more confident, more cocky, more outgoing, more a little bit more belligerent and maybe aggressive at times, more competitive, more like testosterone, flowing through you. So again, do you want that? If you're someone lacking Mars energy, which maybe you are, I don't know, then maybe this could be good for you. But it's I would be cautious. Be there could also be accidents involved, so I'd want to definitely be cautious in those areas. And then in those same areas, you also have your Chiron IC line, so that would be maybe like um, having healing experiences at home, which is kind of a weird dynamic. Maybe I don't know. This sounds like it'd be very personal. So maybe it's with you or close friends or family that you'd have like healing experiences or therapeutic experiences, helping each other or maybe helping yourself kind of make peace with past wounds or traumas, things of that nature. You have your Neptune midheaven line cutting through Brazil here. I think it goes through Sao Paulo, I want to say is right here, and then through Brazil. So this would make your career very confusing. There'd be inexplicable changes with your career. Your career and your public image would just be kind of ebbing and flowing, and it almost like it just wouldn't even make sense. Your career may flourish without you really even trying, or it may kind of collapse even though you're doing everything right. There's almost no rhyme or reason to it. So, would I recommend this? Probably not. On the more positive note, though, like you would be seen as being very spiritual, so that's maybe more productive. Um, you would be known for your kind of intuitive side, your psychic side. So if you wanted to be like a celebrity psychic, this is that type of energy more so. So that could be good. It's just Neptune's not really black or white. It's just kind of it takes a certain person and a certain situation, I think. And then kind of eastern Brazil here, more kind of by the Atlantic coast, we have the moon descendant line and then it crosses near the Mercury IC line. So Mercury IC line is going to make you much more active at home. I'll give you a great example. So when I moved near my Mercury IC line, I started this channel where I was talking a lot at home, and I started my um, work from home call center job. So those are perfect examples. You'd be, experiencing the energy of Mercury at home. So talking, reading, writing, analyzing, learning in the home, though. Taking intellectual focus at home, being more analytical at home, etc. Expanding your intelligence at home. And then moon descendant line, again, that would make you attract people that are moon or cancer kind of themed. So people that are more emotional, more sensitive, maybe more like feminine in nature. And your relationships would be more, maybe more clingy or more emotional, that type of thing. And that too is not necessarily good or bad. Depending on who you are and your current situation, maybe that sounds like the worst thing, or maybe it sounds like exactly the right thing. That with Moon and Mercury, it really just depends. They're not overwhelmingly negative or positive. Okay, let's move on to Europe. Where are we at now? It's been an hour since I've been talking. Wow. Um, well, I guess we just have what, four continents left. So Europe has a lot of lines going over it, and there's so many countries here. So I will be descriptive. We're not even going to talk about Greenland. I know Greenland's not part of Europe anyway, but I just want to say, like, dang, there's just so much going on there. So Iceland is almost an extended part of that. We'll start out with Iceland. Um, it may be very interesting there. So you have your Venus ascendant line, as well as the Neptune descendant line, and the Mercury ascendant line. So let's talk about the Mercury and Venus ascendant lines first. And it's close enough, I'd say, no matter where you are in Iceland. Reykjavik specifically, all three lines are close enough. I would say you would experience all those there, especially the Mercury ascendant line and the Neptune descendant line. So I'm going to kind of talk about all of them as affecting all of Iceland just to make things a little bit more simple. So the Mercury and Venus ascendant lines would make you more, this would be really perfect for you having like really excellent, beautiful conversations with people because your intellectual capacity and expression would be accentuated and enhanced in this area. So you'd be more, articulate or more maybe intellectual or analytical, but you'd also be more attractive. So, and again, with Venus, there's a physical side to it. You may come across as more physically attractive to others, but a lot of this would be your personality, your mannerisms. You'd have a natural kind of easygoing charisma to you as well. So that's why I say combining this kind of beautiful, pleasurable side of Venus with your identity in this area in Iceland, with accentuating the intellectual capacity for you as well. This would be really beautiful for you having like some nice like dinner parties and like really lively conversation or something. That's what happens when you mix Mercury with Venus. So that could be really beautiful. I haven't forgotten about the Neptune descendant line. It's just kind of different in nature. So because it's the descendant, that of course, as we've probably learned by now, that would affect the relationships. Your relationships would have a Neptunian nature. So you would meet people that are Piscean in nature. So people that are maybe very intuitive, maybe psychically oriented, maybe more emotional, people that feel very connected to others. You would have your relationships would take on like a spiritual spin or maybe like a intuitive spin. You could attract more intuitive people, but there's also that confusion that comes along. So you may attract people that are mysterious or confusing, people that are delusional or crazy, um, or maybe people that intentionally mislead you. So there could be like manipulation involved. Um, Man, and then when we factor that in with like this dinner party vibe that I already established, that gets really interesting. Maybe some like colorful characters at your dinner party. That's kind of how I would, mix all these three energies. You're having these really lively dinner parties, but then also attracting some like, some characters there, I guess. Yeah, and then, if you were to bring a relationship there or start a romantic relationship there, honestly, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that on the Neptune descendant line. I mean, it can feel like larger than life, but it may not be real. It'd be pretty much impossible to tell, is what I'm feeling with this relationship real? Like, there'd be no clarity. Um, so maybe not. Let's move on. Let's move on to the UK next. Well, first for Ireland, Northern Ireland, there's the Uranus descendant line. So bringing about that unpredictability with your relationships. And this line cuts across, southern UK, kind of close to London, kind of close to Paris, through France, very close to like Monaco and Genoa in Italy, and then it cuts through Corsica, Sardinia, by Sicily, through Libya. Um, you know what? You already know this because of the timestamps probably, but I'm gonna combine Europe and Africa for the sake of time, but also because it's these same lines pretty much that are going through Europe and Africa and the Middle East. Let's get really crazy and I'm gonna make my own continent. I'm gonna say Europe, Africa, and the Middle East are all one thing because as you can see, as I'm showing here, these lines kind of cut through the whole thing. So, for the sake of time, let's just do those all as a group. So, okay, so the blue line cuts over Northern Ireland, UK, France, Italy, especially these main islands, Corsica, which I know is France, but then Sardinia and Sicily. Libya, Sudan, uh, let's see, Southern Sudan, cuts by Uganda, Tanzania, Mozambique, very southern Madagascar. Uranus descendant line is gonna make your relationships unpredictable. This in itself is not necessarily good or bad. Like I said before, if you're in a relationship and it's very committed, everything's fine, but it's just kind of boring, you want to shake things up, go to your Uranus descendant line. Um, Before I say that, I should take in mind that you also have your Saturn descendant line, so this could make in the same area because it's very very close to the Uranus descendant line. In those same areas I just mentioned, you would experience delays with your relationship. So again, these are opposing energies, they're very different in nature. So combining both of them is interesting. Neptune descendant line would kind of do the opposite. It would make things more strict, more slow to change, more stable. So maybe you could find this healthy balance in your relationships on this line and with the people that you attract on this line of stability, conservatism, but also kind of unpredictable changes as well. So I feel like it would take a very specific situation to want to go to this energy for an extended period of time. It gets a little bit more interesting over the UK because the Venus ascendant line crosses over the same area. So this I think could be really beautiful. You would be more attractive in UK, France, um, Tunisia, Libya, Chad, Central African Republic, Congo. I forget what that country's called. Zambia, and then kind of eastern South Africa. Let's just say so through pretty much the middle of Africa. You would be very attractive. You would come across as that easygoing charisma. Same with Iceland that I talked about. Um, let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You would just be much more appealing to people. You'd be more, not that you aren't now, but you'd be more charismatic. It would accentuate, that you would be much more pleasurable to people. So that would be cool. You could take advantage of that. Let's take a step back here and cover the Pluto descendant line goes through. Doesn't quite touch Iceland or the UK or Ireland or Portugal, but it does cross through Morocco, Western Sahara, and mostly Western Sahara, and then these kind of Western African countries. I wouldn't recommend living by the Pluto descendant line. I actually did for most of my life, and um, so Pluto would color your relationship. So you would attract people of a Plutonian nature. So maybe people that are like dark, mysterious, manipulative, crazy, or you could also attract very powerful people as well, very intuitive people, mysterious people. I already said that. And likewise, this energy would color your relationships as well. So your relationships may be, it'd be very dark. You would attract very intense events through other people and through your relationships. So your relationships could become very extreme. You could also become paranoid with other people. So this could exacerbate any like social tensions or social anxiety that you may have. What else? It would make you very strong. Pluto does push you to evolve. It challenges you. So you would be challenged through your relationships, through other people. You would be pushed to become greater, to become stronger. So that that it's definitely not fun. It's not enjoyable. So I wouldn't. I think life is kind of challenging enough as it is. You don't really need more challenges. But if you really wanted to push yourself to become stronger through other people, maybe that's somewhere to go. But I would not recommend that. Jupiter ascendant line crosses over Morocco, Western Africa, kind of central Western Africa, let's just say. And that's it. So on those areas, you could experience expansion. So kind of Jupiter is also kind of like the opposite of Saturn, kind of like Uranus. So you would, rather than constriction with your identity, your self-expression, etc., you would have expansion. So you could gain weight in these areas. And again, that's not necessarily good or bad. It could be just enjoying yourself, having a good time, being lazy, eating a lot. On the Jupiter line, it is a benefic. It's generally positive, but that's one of the possible downsides. You could be having too much of a good thing, too much fun, enjoying yourself too much. So, maybe eating good food, relaxing, so maybe gaining weight. But it could also be like, being really energetic and active. Those are almost like keywords of Jupiter as well. So maybe like you could also be more maybe enjoying yourself through adventures. Maybe that would be physical. You could be more like muscular, gaining weight as well. But there's like a weight gain theme with Jupiter. It's just very different ways that can happen. Typically, it would be through like excess or activity. Jupiter is adding, it's expanding, so but generally it's very pleasurable, and you would exude this kind of pleasurable, optimistic energy. You may be more, looking at the glass half full, outgoing, adventurous, very active, etc. Okay, back to Europe. There's the next kind of bunch of three lines here. We've got kind of wild colors. Neptune is the purple line. Neptune descendant is the purple line, I should say. Chiron ascendant line is the black one, and then Mercury ascendant line is this light green one. And they arch over from Iceland through Denmark, Germany, um, Czech Republic, Poland, kind of Eastern Europe, the Balkans, and then down through Mercury ascendant line crosses right through Istanbul. And then Athens would be affected by especially your Neptune descendant line, and a little bit of the Chiron ascendant line as well. And then these three lines cut through Egypt and Israel. Mercury ascendant line cuts through Cyprus, and then they kind of go down through Eastern Africa. Mercury ascendant line grazes the coast of Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and then they kind of go down through Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, and they get farther apart as you go south, as you can see here. But the Neptune and Chiron lines do go through Madagascar. So okay, and this is such a kind of wild bunch. So the green Mercury ascendant line that cuts through, Romania, Poland, Denmark, Saudi Arabia, Cyprus, etc. This would make you more intellectual, more So if you wanted to be like a teacher, or if you wanted to learn, it doesn't, you'd be learning and teaching a lot more on this line. You would be the teacher and the student. You'd be very intellectual, very analytical, taking on a more analytical focus. This could be, this is a neutral energy. It really just depends on what you want to do. If you want to learn more, if you want to like take a vacation where where you're like studying, I don't know if that would still be called a vacation, but yeah, then that line would be ideal for that kind of energy. The Neptune descendant line again would make your relationships very confusing, mysterious, attracting mysterious people, attracting intuitive or psychic people, but also potentially confusing or manipulative people. Um, it's that double-edged sword of, when you go into that non-physical focus. Yes, it can be enlightening. It can also be confusing and make you crazy. So you get both through your relationships on that line. And then last one that kind of cuts through this whole region is the Chiron ascendant line. So you would be more of a mentor, a guide for others, maybe helping people. Like you'd be almost like taking on like a counselor role. Um, you yourself could also be experiencing a lot of themes of, um, I don't know, maybe going back, focusing on these past traumas or wounds that you've had, and healing those through experiences that you'd be having on these areas. Let's see. Let's talk about the North Node Midheaven line. This is a vertical line. It cuts through pretty remote, like Sweden and Finland. Cuts kind of grazes the Baltic states, cuts through Poland, down through the middle of the Balkans, Libya, Chad, and then pretty much right through the middle of Africa. Let's just say, and through South Africa. So the North Node Midheaven line, we talked about nodal energy. The North Node is a positive, force. You would have a lot of growth here, but it's unstable. So constant growth, constant change, constant evolution, constant, unlikely karmic events, um, constant, really rapid evolution for you. And this would be occurring through your career. So your career would be constantly changing, growing, morphing, evolving. Yes, that could be really good, but again, like I said, I would take it in a certain dose. I wouldn't want to live there because your career would just be constantly changing, constantly wild, taking you on these really grand adventures. And again, that could be really thrilling. That could be really cool for a little while, but the constant change gets old. I think we all desire a little bit of stability, especially with our career and our public image. Um, yeah, and it's interesting where this line crosses through the Neptune descendant and Chiron ascendant lines, like right in like Macedonia, Albania, Greece. So you'd have all three in that area. And then this line also crosses a lot of lines, but in Europe it crosses the Mercury ascendant line and the Sun ascendant line. Speaking of the Sun ascendant line, this is one of the most positive lines you could be on. It crosses through kind of the middle of Scandinavia, so not near the cities at all, but like up north more so, where it's more desolate. I think this crosses through Helsinki though. I think Helsinki is on this line. And then it crosses through. Gosh, my geography is getting rusty. I forget. I think it's Estonia. Through Russia, and it's kind of like Russia. It's like the Russia border near these former Soviet states of Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, etc. And then it does cross through Iran and Oman and the UAE as well. So on these locations, or in these locations, you would be more exuberant, you'd be more outgoing, you'd be very charismatic. You'd have this youthful energy about you where you just come across more naturally. You're more open, you're more outgoing, you're more active. So that's pretty much it. It's very simple to explain, but that's a very positive force. You may be more optimistic there as well. You'd be looking on the bright things and spreading that energy as well. Cool. We covered all of Africa and all of Europe other than Russia. So we're making progress here. So to wrap up this Europe, Middle East, Africa section, there are just two lines we need to talk about. They go through Russia, the Middle East, and East Africa. They are the red and blue here that you see on the screen. They're the Mars Midheaven line and the Moon IC line. So the Mars Midheaven line cuts through, I believe it cuts through Moscow, and then through the middle of Turkey, like by Ankara, maybe, kind of. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique. Mars Midheaven line would make you much more ambitious at work, more competitive. So I think I said earlier, if you were gonna be on a Mars line, the Mars Midheaven line could maybe be a good one if you wanted that. If you wanted to be more active, ambitious, goal-oriented, competitive, decisive, really, having that testosterone flowing in the context of your work and your reputation. So you'd be seen as more competitive. Um, you know, I already know you, but I'm just saying, like, for someone, if you had a lot of fire or Mars energy in your chart, you would not want this because you would just be kind of seen as an a-hole. But if you are a naturally more kind of shy person or more, not super competitive, for instance, this could be a good thing just depending on what you're looking for. If you wanted to be more competitive, more fiery in public and at work, then this could be good for you. Just kind of depends. I would still approach this with caution because Mars, I will say this a million times, it can it can correlate to, like, violence, aggression, accidents, etc. So, I think it'd be ideal, like, if you were, like, a pro athlete, but then that would be scary because it could could correlate with, like, injuries. But I don't know if you wanted to be like a athlete or something. I know you don't. I'm just saying, like, that's kind of like what the line would be. As for the moon IC line, it cuts through Madagascar, Somalia, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, Caspian Sea, Kazakhstan, and then Russia. And Moon Eye Sea Line would make you more private, more sensitive, especially at home. So you'd be more emotional at home as well. I think that wraps it up. So we are at an hour and 21 minutes, but we only have pretty much like the eastern half or two-thirds of Asia and then Australia. And I'm going to combine these as well because, as you can see, these lines are all pretty vertical. So many of them run through East Asia and Australia. So let's just cover, we'll just say Asia and Australia together. So okay. So first up, first I want to mention there's kind of this gray area. If you go to, this part of Russia, like I think the Urals are around here, Ural Mountains, most of Kazakhstan, and then these former Soviet states, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and also Afghanistan, much of Pakistan, much of Iran. There's not a whole lot of lines there. So, um, are you looking to go there anytime soon? Probably not, so maybe it's irrelevant. But if you were going to go there and you really wanted to know the astrocartography of that area, we would have to do a deep dive and, conjure up a chart for that specific area. What we would have more an idea of would be where this line is, the Black Pluto IC line. It crosses over right through the middle of India. I believe it goes right by New Delhi. Um, Kind of this Hindu Kush region, the far western reaches of China, through parts of Kazakhstan and Russia. This would bring the Pluto energy to your home life. I really, really would not recommend this at all. I'm just gonna say straight outright. It's one of those things where it's like, if you do ever want Pluto energy, I would not think you'd want it at home. I think if anything, you'd want that maybe with your career, kind of like Mars, but not in your home life on your IC line. So in these areas, you would be more paranoid at home. Maybe you'd be more secretive with your home life or in your home life. You'd be paranoid maybe of people that you're living with or family members, or maybe very close friends you'd be more paranoid with. There'd be maybe issues of manipulation, secrecy, power struggles, insecurities, things of that nature. Let's move on. The next line is much, much more positive and also different in what it's affecting. This pink line, Jupiter Midheaven line, this is one of those lines that you'd want to go to. This would be really good. Um, okay, so this crosses through Bangladesh, Eastern India, Bhutan, Tibet, the Xinjiang province of China, I believe, Western Mongolia. I probably totally butchered that, but and then through kind of like Siberia. Like, I'm gonna call this all of this part of Russia, Siberia, really. Okay, so Jupiter Midheaven line, this would expand your career, so that's pretty cool. You'd be seen as much more optimistic, outgoing, exuberant. You'd be seen in public and in your career as very charismatic because you'd have this infectious, optimistic attitude, and you'd be maybe very funny, more so, more humorous, very charming, and you'd have expansion with your career and public image as a result. So, this energetic enthusiasm would go a long way with your career and public image in these areas. Next is the North Node descendant line. It crosses over Siberia, central Mongolia, kind of central eastern China, if that makes sense. That's probably not. That's my best way of saying it. And then through, I forget what that island's called, but kind of off the coast of Vietnam, through eastern Malaysia, through Borneo, through eastern Java, through it skims the west coast of Australia as well. So a lot of kind of remote locations that I don't know you'll go to, but we'll cover it all anyway, just to be thorough. So North Node descendant line, North Node again, very positive, lots of positive changes happening very quickly, but unstable. And this in these areas is coloring your relationships. So meeting really karmic people that you connect with on a deep level, but and maybe having experiences that change your life and really expand your consciousness through these fascinating people on this line. But it's unstable, so I almost picture like really interesting, meaningful interactions, but these people are just coming in and out of your life. It may be actually hard to have a stable relationship, or even like a friendship on these lines. So that's where, I love nodal energy. It can be so exhilarating. You can be like figuring stuff out, having these, cinematic level experiences, but it's just not sustainable. So visit these areas, don't live there, is what I would say, especially, concerning your relationships. Um, and in Indonesia, this line does cross over the Venus Midheaven line. Venus Midheaven line also crosses through eastern China, eastern Mongolia, and Siberia. Venus Midheaven line would make you much more desirable and charismatic with your career, much like the Jupiter Midheaven line. And you'd also be maybe making more money with your job, with your career, and having more fun with it as well. It'd be very pleasurable. So this is overwhelmingly positive. Definitely go for it. And it'd be really interesting, kind of I mean, there's not a lot of big cities, I don't think, near where these lines cross, but kind of southwestern Borneo or eastern Java would be really interesting where these lines cross because you'd be having overwhelmingly positive experiences, but it'd almost be like too overly saturated, like too intense of, too much good stuff happening so fast that you can't even absorb it. It's almost like you wouldn't have any chance to even integrate or appreciate it before more stuff is happening, and it would almost be, I'm almost picturing like a movie that's like super slapstick, super, comedy and positive, but it's almost like drenched with like too much comedy. It's just too much stuff happening too fast. So that'd be really interesting just to observe, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of what this little area of Indonesia would be. I'm realizing now, I guess it's a little late, but I could be like pointing this whole time. More so. Or maybe I have been subconsciously. I guess I don't know. But we have another one of your Saturn Uranus conjunction lines. So these together go through Siberia, Manchuria. I believe they go by Beijing, and I think there's other coastal cities here that I'm probably forgetting the name of. They go through Taiwan, Philippines, sort of these eastern islands of Indonesia or central islands of Indonesia, Sulawesi, I think, and then through Western Australia. And on these lines, these are your Saturn and Uranus IC lines. So your home life would be more strict, you'd be more disciplined at home, but you'd also have unpredictable changes at home or with your home life. Also, maybe dramatic changes in your consciousness from events that transpire at home. Okay, and then next, the Chiron midheaven lines and the Chiron midheaven line and the Mars descendant line are pretty much conjunct through central Australia, eastern islands of Indonesia, right off the coast of the east coast of the Philippines, and then right through South Korea, North Korea, Manchuria, and again Siberia. So, man, and these are so interesting. I'll have to cover each separately. So the Mars descendant line would make your relationships more competitive. You could be more irritable with other people. Maybe other people would be more irritable with you. More competitive, more angsty, more testosterone fueled. It could also be more sexual though. More active. You may be more confident as well with other people, with your relationships. So I would generally avoid this line, but it's, again, especially if you're someone lacking Mars energy, you could be um, maybe, the silver lining of it would be being competitive could be good sometimes. Being sexual could be good maybe. So I guess kind of a mixed bag. I would typically be wary of Mars lines. Mercury, or excuse me, Chiron midheaven line in the same area, in these same areas would, sorry, Chiron midheaven line. So you would be, your career could make you more of like a mentor, a guide, helping other people with their traumas, with their wounds. Or maybe your work could result in you healing your own wounds as well. Next would be this Neptune IC line, this kind of purplish line, cuts through Siberia, the far east of Russia, through very southern Japan, and then through eastern Indonesia, and right smack dab through the middle of Australia. So the Neptune IC line would make you more intuitive at home, more psychic at home, but also potentially more delusional or confused at home. I think that pretty much sums that up, honestly. I'm going to move on. Next, we've got the Mercury midheaven line. It cuts through, of course, Siberia, and then right through the middle of Japan. I believe it cuts through Tokyo. I'm not totally sure, but I know Tokyo would be within range of this line for sure. And then it also cuts down through Papua New Guinea and kind of central Australia. So Mercury midheaven line could, it would make you more intellectual with your work. You would be more analytical at work. You'd be maybe like a teacher. If you wanted to be a teacher, this would be a really, really perfect line because you'd be seen as someone who's intellectual, analytical, intelligent, someone who's an excellent learner as well as disperser of information. You'd be taking on the role of Mercury. I think that sums it up. Maybe I'm getting more concise with my explanations. I think that sums it up though. Okay, and then next would be the moon ascendant line. Cuts over. It's almost irrelevant. I mean, it really cuts over like Kamchatka, and then it cuts down through Central Australia and Papua New Guinea. Moon ascendant line. It would make you more emotional, more sensitive, also more intuitive, maybe. Um, Emotional, sensitive, intuitive. I think that covers it. You'd be, you're already a Cancer, so you'd take on even more like Cancer energy. It would strengthen that for you. Is that good or bad? If you wanted to get in touch with your emotions, then this would be exactly what you need. But, if you don't want to be more emotional, don't go by this line. That pretty much sums that up. Wow, and we're almost done here, so I guess that wasn't too bad. It's been like an hour and a half. Next is the Sun midheaven line. This cuts over Kamchatka. Wow. I wouldn't say it's close enough to Sydney to really affect it, but it grazes the very far eastern coast of Australia. Maybe along this eastern coast you could maybe kind of experience it. I don't know about Sydney. It's maybe a little bit. I mean, it's a little far. Sun midheaven line. This is very positive. It's maybe too bad it doesn't go over more landmass area, but Um, you would be more outgoing at work, more charismatic, more active, more bold. Um, you'd be very, very visible. You'd handle attention, very well. People would notice you. People would admire you and favor you. You'd come across very favorably. Excuse me. You'd come across very strong. You have this like strong, consistent, fiery energy that we get from the sun. So you would come across like a Leo with your career more so. So that could be very advantageous. And I guess we just have, I would say, two more lines to cover, really. But I didn't cover Hawaii. I'm gonna include Hawaii in this. This is gonna be such a weird categorization. Okay, but first let's talk about the Pluto ascendant line. It crosses over Kamchatka, like Siberia. New Caledonia. I remembered it. New Caledonia, and then it crosses through like it goes right by very far southern New Zealand. Um, Pluto ascendant line can make you more. You'd have a mysterious aura. You'd have like a magnetism about you. People would be very attracted to you. You'd come across very mysterious. But this could also make you paranoid and insecure, and you'd be constantly dealing with challenging situations challenging you with issues involving your insecurities. Um, Kind of like the deepest, darkest parts of your psychology you'd be constantly battling. So is it all negative? No. But would I generally avoid this line? Yeah, probably. And I'm trying to see. I think the Jupiter descendant line goes by, I think this is Fiji. And that's about it until it gets to North America, which I already covered. So, I mean, I guess by Fiji, Jupiter descendant line, you'd be attracting people that are very charismatic, outgoing, adventurous, and your relationships would take on that energy as well. I'm just gonna leave it at that. And lastly, to take us home and completely wrap this up here, we'll end this with Hawaii. And Hawaii, we do just have this North Node IC line going right through it. I'm not familiar with all the islands. It's not the big islands. It's farther out into these little smaller islands that are farther to the northwest or to the west. Um, the North Node IC line does cross through there. So again, I think that's the first line I interpreted. So that would be constant growth and change, very positive stuff, but specifically happening with your home life. So you're at your home, you'd be constantly changing and growing, but this is not sustainable. It's not ideal for stable living. And I think, earlier I said it would almost repel you by its very nature. It could be very positive, but by its very nature, you would move around a lot. So you'd probably move off this line anyway, even if you did live there. But I think, and I think I touched on this already too, but especially visiting this line could be very powerful, I think, very positive. If you wanted to kind of expand your consciousness, it just wouldn't be ideal for, permanent living, I would say. Wow, so that is, yeah, we covered the whole world. So happy birthday. I hope you enjoyed this. I didn't realize what a large task I was taking on, but I guess that was only an hour and a half. That wasn't too bad. Um, okay, so I will start taking notes on this, and yeah, I'm excited to see. I'm sure you'll have many travels in the world, so it will be really interesting to study this, to like go out in the field and, maybe you can see if exactly how this is true for you because I do believe in this. I believe it's true, but having it doesn't in a way, even if it's accurate, it doesn't compare to you actually going to the place and like really experiencing it for yourself. So be interesting to learn more about. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna get busy taking notes, but have an amazing day, happy birthday, and I'll see you later.